All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a particularly special episode of Fountain Camping. This week we are live with the Campfire with Coffee, as our guest host today is none other than Toffees of Coffee with Toffees, Around the Pit, and Collegiate Star League fame. Toffees, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you.
Hey, glad to be here. I'm excited. I heard that we were planning the same show from different angles and thought it'd be much cooler if we just did it together. So excited to be here on the show and see what we got for us tonight.
Yeah, so by our powers combined, we are Campfire with Coffees, and we are live tonight with SunTzu, Gorgon, MotPax, and Danelie. We are here talking about the qualifiers and the majors and all things fun. Let's start us off by introducing our guests for the night. SunTzu, tell us a little bit about who you are and where the heck you got your name from.
Hi guys, I'm Johan SunTzu Järvinen. Finnish dude. I sort of got into gaming like way too long ago. And one of the first games that I really got into was actually Counter-Strike. Like, we're talking 0.7, something like that. 0.6, 0.7. And that's actually where this current nickname comes from. I was using another nickname on IRC, but for some reason I changed it for a CS game. And because in the console at the time was like, I couldn't be arsed to do whatever quotation marks or whatever. So in order to get the SunTzu, I used the what's it called, underscore, and that's why it's in the name. Stuck since then.
Alrighty then. Next up, we're gonna go. We're going with counterclockwise right now. Next, we've got Gorgon, aka TheWonderCow. Gorgon, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit how you got your name.
When I was a boy, my parents would take my sister and I out to a LAN center, which was about a 40-minute drive because I grew up in the middle of the woods, and we would play Unreal Tournament against the adults who hung out at the LAN center, and I would always be the DanelieCasts, which is a race. And I have obsessive compulsive disorder, so I always had to use the same computer, and the computers had names, and the name of the computer that I had to use because of my OCD was labeled Gorgon, and so I was Gorgon the cow. And then I like Monty Python. I really liked Monty Python as a kid, and there's a gag in Monty Python about Ralph the Wonder Llama, so I just kind of stuck that in there, and hence the whole piece, a lot of amalgamations of various bits.
It's way better than mine. Fuck you.
Yeah, I gotta say his is pretty good. But we have been told that our next guest has the best origin story for her name of all time. We are happy to welcome Danelie of DanelieCasts. She was recently at the major, so she's probably got a bit of insight for us there. But Danny, you tell us that you have the best origin story for the name.
Okay, so I don't think many people actually have this. Originally, I was going to call myself Nino. It's a family thing. I can't really explain that. It's personal. So I went, you know what? I'm just going to call myself my normal name. Easy to identify. Now, I was supposed to be born Danielle, right? And my mum told this specifically to the nurse, because you know how the nurse writes up the birth certificate. She typoed my name. She typoed my birth name on the certificate. And I was thinking, how does this correlate to Danielle in any way? You look at the spelling of my name, like that is the actual spelling that she put on my birth certificate. No one noticed till I was 3 years old, because people they just skimmed my birth certificate, like, oh, it's just Danielle, it's fine. I'm just going to let you into the country. It's absolutely okay. Try to migrate to Australia. Oh, nope, your name is Danny Lee. It's not Danielle. My parents were like, what's this? Danny Lee. So that happened. And at this point, sort of thought, like, you know what? It's too much of a hassle to change her name. It's like, it's okay. You can be a typo for the rest of your life. You're an accident. It's okay.
Hey guys, Jenny may in fact have won the best name ever. MotPax, do you have anything that could possibly follow that up?
Oh man, talk about pressure. Jeez. No, mine goes in like the opposite direction of like your nurse screwed up, but mine is like some good like self cringe a little bit, kind of. So when I also grew up in the woods. Shout out to the now missing Ryan. Oh, no, there he is. He's back.
I'm there with you, Woodland buddy.
I was way out there too, and so I never did any. No online gaming or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I had to come up with the name. It was Oblivion, I think, for PC. My brother finally got a gaming PC. We had to like name our characters or something. So it wasn't even online related. But anyway, I was studying. This was grade 10, so it's not even like I was like super young. It's not even like that much of an excuse. And I was studying a lot of history because I was a big history buff growing up. And Mot was the Mesopotamian god of death, M-O-T, the first one. I thought it sounded really cool. And then I took Pax from like Latin, like Pax Romanus, all that bullshit. Combined the two together, and there we are. So
you're Death Piece.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's good. You guys are welcome.
Wow.
I actually had a Latin name as well at one point. That was before SunTzu. I was Domini from Anno Domini. Yeah.
Did you look up the meaning of Pax?
I'm scared to now. But
I mean, it's
No,
just
it literally means peace.
I know.
Your
It's
name is
from the
Death
Pax
Piece.
Romanus. It's
Yes.
from like the big era of. I thought you meant like there was some like.
No, I think it's
some
funny
urban
you chose
dictionary
Death
meaning
Piece.
you were about to drop on me or something here.
Roman
No, it's like-
civilians could go anywhere in the known world and simply say, I am a Roman citizen, and they were.
Unless, of course, their name was misspelled, like Danny's was. So, now getting to the actual topic of our show. We're here to talk about the qualifiers, especially given that there's been a bit more hubbub recently about the possibility of the NA and EU regional qualifiers containing some pretty high-level teams. But let's start out with the invited teams. Of course, the first question we have to ask is how many teams are actually getting invited? Feel free to argue amongst yourselves how many you think will actually get invited, but kind of that number, which one's the most likely to be picked and why?
Okay, so I actually spent quite a while today and over the weekend researching all the Valve events and going back with all my notes on all the stuff I've been doing, writing since like 2013. I've got stacks of notes from those times, right? So based on what's happened with the majors most recently, I think the most realistic projection is 10 teams invited, 2 teams wild card, 1 qualifier from each region. I don't know how everybody feels about that.
That's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So you think they're going to follow the TI5 model?
Basically, yeah. So the only other small percentage option that I see as being at all based in trends of the past would be 8 direct invite, 2 from each region. But I think that's pretty unlikely. I
don't think they're
5% chance and 95% chance on 10-2-4 split.
I don't think they're doing away with the wild card, and in order to have a wild card, I think they're kind of in love with the whole system that they're using right now, which is 2 groups of 5, and then that goes into a GSL style playoff stage. And that's always going to produce that's meant to produce 2 teams. So I don't think that they're going to invent some system that would have like a more than 2 going through. And that means if you want to have a wild card and if you want to have 2 going through, you need 10 invites. So it's almost, I'm fairly certain that that's going to be.
There's also the small possibility that they take all 4 teams from the wild card and give them 1 wild card slot at TI, and therefore they can get 1 extra invite. But I couldn't figure out who that invite would possibly be. So if you're looking like OG Liquid Navi, LGD Newbie, VGR, Fnatic, MVP Phoenix, and then either Complexity or Digital Chaos, that's like everyone who really deserves an invite right now, right? So, and that's your 10.
So that is one of the interesting ones to talk about, the Complexity.
Did you
versus
have
DC
Alliance
pickup.
on your list?
I did.
Yeah, I was about to say.
He does
I don't
not
think
know.
it was there.
I think Alliance is going to have to vie through.
No, I think Alliance gets one.
Do you think they get one regardless of how they do it
Wait,
against someone?
who did you have up there instead of Alliance then?
Either Complexity or DC, I guess. So if we're looking at...
I was counting on, basically it's the top 8 plus Alliance and Complexity in my mind. Because,
for me, it's top 8, Complexity, then 1 team from ESL 1 Frankfurt Performance. And I count Alliance as the most likely team out.
Yeah, but like ESL 1 Frankfurt, that's 4 teams that are top 8, plus Alliance is actually there. So that's like, there's like 3 teams that could make a performance there, and that's
right. It could ostensibly be
Vega,
Virtus
Pro, and
so as it happens, Gorgon actually recently wrote an article. I'm going to put him slightly on the spot right now. If we go with the 10, 2, and 4 format, which seems fairly likely it seems the most likely of the ones that have been suggested. The list of definite invites that you had, Gorgon, were OG, Liquid, Navi, LGD, Newbie, VGR, Fnatic, MVP Phoenix, Complexity, and some top team from ESL1 Frankfurt, which could be Alliance, could be Vega, could be somebody along those lines. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Alliance is by far the most likely team to get something out of ESL1.
Yeah.
So I guess I agree with Johan. Like, basically, Alliance is
And also,
pending performance.
like, it's sort of easy to forget about it because we've had the whole major system and we've sort of been conditioned to just look at 3-month periods.
Mhm.
But this is TI, and basically the whole year performance is supposed to feed into this.
Right.
And for Alliance, they have those two tournament wins. They have a top 8 at Shanghai. Even if they came up short at Manila, that's still like their record is pretty good. In terms of the teams that are eligible and that actually have like a record with this roster. Same thing for Complexity. They made top 6 at Shanghai. They've been like top 4 at a couple of other events, and they've been at a number of events. So that's my reasoning why those are 2 extras. And I don't think you can't drop out anyone from top 8 either.
I think before we get into the bones of like who deserves to get invited and stuff, I think something that a lot of people are talking about is format. And you sort of brought up briefly, there's lots of options here. And it seems like what Gorgon said and you said, Sud, the idea of this 10 plus 4 wild card plus qualifiers seems pretty popular. Why don't we see that format at other tournaments? Is it because Valve has unlimited finances? It can fly out the wild card teams for the mini LAN, or like why don't we see the other three majors using the same system?
It's just the logistical costs.
Okay.
There's also less of a need for it. The majors can be less precise. It doesn't matter as much. TI is the big one. TI is the actual like world championship for the year. So that's the one where you actually want the 16 best teams and you want to be fairly certain that you actually got them. So
also the scheduling time, like to do wild matches, you need a couple extra days.
That's also true.
Absolutely. Right. Now let me move over to MotPax and is it do you want me to say Danielle or Danelie?
Just call me Danny. I think it's easier that way instead of trying to
not Dane. All right, so MotPax and Danny. Let me ask you this, because you guys I know cover a lot of events. You see a lot of tournaments that are played over the internet. The fact that they're flying out the wildcard teams usually brings up the fact that Valve's budget is usually pretty large. Do you think it's important that we move to a point, because it's been discussed pretty aggressively, where the qualifiers move to a LAN instead of being online based like they have been in the past? How big of an impact do you think that has on some teams?
Oh, I mean, it's massive, right? Like you've got teams that are, we've had instances with like infrastructure in the past. Some teams get, into some sort of an issue because like their team house or something runs into problems. And like, what if that shuts down your TI run? Mm-hmm. I don't think we need to have any sort of an argument about the finances of Valve to put something like that on. Let's all be just frank here. Like if they wanted to, I'm sure it's something that's very doable considering the current economy of the game. I guess maybe I don't work at Valve, so I can't be certain, but it seems pretty reasonable to me. I'm sure that it's coming.
I don't know if the I don't know if the sort of cost benefit ratio is like correct for that, but in terms of if they wanted to do it, they do have the resources.
So let's also, for the same thing that I just said, time is an issue there, right? Right now, they're squeezing in the qualifiers in a week between 2 tournaments. And if Valve is now going to fly out 10 teams from every region to a regional hub and then have them compete, you
also run into a problem because they want these open qualifiers, both as a means to punish teams that break the roster lock, and as a means to give teams that hadn't earned their spot in the qualifiers. So you want those open qualifiers, and as long as you have open qualifiers, either you have to run them significantly before the main qualifier, or you have to run it online.
And something else to consider, I know MotPax and Danny especially, you guys have covered a lot more online tournaments. So these are not necessarily teams that have LAN experience. So the impact of having a pre-TI LAN experience of some sort is probably pretty disruptive for the teams, I guess, is the best word I can come up with. Like, Danny, like some of like the smaller like tier 2 or so teams that you've casted, like, do they have any big LAN experience? Do they have locals that they've been able to do?
It really depends on the region, honestly. Some regions, they have a lot of lands that you're able to attend, and then there are other regions where they can't afford to have lands, or teams can't even afford to fly over for events. Like, especially in C, money is a huge problem, and unfortunately, lands like our lands are prehistoric compared to what you have in NA, as well as Europe. So in Southeast Asia, because these teams don't have LAN experience, it really hurts them when it comes to these LAN events. Like, there are certain teams that are fine. Obviously, MVP Phoenix, like, we can all agree that they perform spectacular on LAN, but then you see them online and it seems like they're a completely different team. I don't know if they do it on purpose or if it's actually something that
Saving
they're
strats.
suffering, but maybe saving strats, who knows? Like, everything's in the mind, right? But I think, like, I don't say it's a bad thing, like the disruptiveness of the LAN, because it really shows how some teams, they might be able to perform on LAN compared to others that suffer. So I feel like I've got mixed thoughts. Like, it's disruptive, but for other teams it's good because they can show their true potential.
If we ever got to like the dream of 3 majors, like 2 majors in TI, which I think might be coming next year. I don't know. Maybe they're just too obsessed with this whole idea they got going now. But currently the schedule, there's no way that even a regional LAN qualifier would work. They barely work right now, which is a really good point that was just brought up by you guys. But like, I guess I'm thinking of it in a vacuum of, it's like, is it feasible and should it be done? Competitively, it should certainly be done. But when you actually go into the logics of, you know, teams being moved, open qualifiers are a huge issue when it comes to that. It's just, there's no way it's going to work in the current system.
You're basically, in order to do that, and I agree that that's a laudable goal, but in order to do that, you're basically saying Dota is going to go into a federation model, like an LCS, NBA, NFL style model, right? The only way logistically to do it, because they don't want to run huge expensive lands to fly people out if they're not getting viewership out of it, right? So that means they're going to stagger the lands per region, which means no other third-party events can happen while there's 2 weeks for Southeast Asia, there's 2 weeks for North and South America, there's 2 weeks for Europe, there's 2 weeks for China. Suddenly that's 2 months out of the year no third party can happen. And then ostensibly you're talking about maybe LAN qualifiers for each of the majors as well. Or that's another, even if we only have 2 other majors, that's another 4 months. So half the year right now just for Valve qualifiers, and then another week and a buffer week for each of the majors. And then 2 to 3 weeks for the international. That's almost the entire year. So if you're going to do that, we're basically looking at an LCS style model, which I think would be fine, but it's not at all what Valve wants.
What Valve wants. Do you think the MotPax's point of a 3 major or a 2 major in TI model would be better? It leaves more space for third-party tournaments, leaves time for qualifiers. Is that a better system?
I think I actually wrote about this on PvP Live as well last week. I think a 2 major plus international model is hugely better for teams and for Valve and for everybody involved. It allows teams to hit their roster windowing the way that they did before the roster locks without significantly changing the roster lock system, so that they're able to actually test teams out before locking them in for the international. It provides a little more cushion. I'll link to that article in the chat at some point.
And there's also another point in that, like, for me, the biggest reason why we need to go to 2 majors in TI instead of 3 majors in TI is the patches have gotten ridiculously short, and this last one was in particular. Like, people might have looked at those games and gone, "Oh my God, the game is so well balanced. There was 95 different heroes picked during Manila Major." No, what you saw was basically like, if you look at sort of the maturity of the patch, that was the equivalent of the previous patch, the Shanghai patch. This was the equivalent of when Alliance won Star Ladder, where literally they were running initiating mids and running timing push strats, and then you compare that to what the meta was when we got to Shanghai. That's how immature basically the meta was at Manila, and that's why we had 95 heroes picked, because people had no idea what's actually working. And so that's just
sorry, it sounds like the consensus is that 4 is too many. It's a laudable idea, right? When you think about Valve saying we should have majors, 1 a quarter makes sense to me. If we move to 3, that changes the way that the rosters work out. But since we're talking about Valve ideas that may not have worked out, I want to ask you guys also about roster locks. It's a good time to sort of bring that one up. Was 4 majors shoved this close together a bad idea, or was roster locks a worse idea?
Can anyone tell me why we got a lock like 6 months? Like, does anyone have like a good logical reason as to why we're locking between Manila and TI?
I know.
No.
Yeah. So think about when invitation discussions started happening behind closed doors for the international, right? They usually started happening around March. That's when teams started getting in contact with Valve or vice versa about potential invitations. March-ish, you couldn't have a roster lock at March for the international because of the way that the major system works, so they had to move it back to whatever the most recent roster lock would be, because after the Shanghai major would be too late for Valve to start working on logistics. It'd be too late for Valve to start thinking about which teams are going to be invited. And Valve kind of got kicked in the ass for this because they were almost certainly planning on inviting EG in secret, and now they can't invite either, ostensibly, right? So all that hard work has kind of been forced out the window anyway. But it does match their previous year's patterns. They just moved it back about a month and a half or 2 months because they wanted to fit in 4 majors.
Well, can you imagine if there had been a trade period before ESL, before the TI Open, like how chaotic this 2-week period would be?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the one we had, though, to be fair. But of course, it does make your invites incredibly difficult. Like, how do you judge? Like, imagine you were trying to judge right now who to invite if there was a roster lock. Like, let's pretend these swaps just happened again with EG in secret, and you just had DC do their thing, and everyone's like legit. That would still be a pretty tough scenario.
Right. So, like, I'm not
Personally,
saying that the roster locks as they were the best possible solution, but I see why they did it. I just don't think that it was very gracefully executed,
I'm gonna talk about something more than just like this 6-month lock. I like just in general about roster locks. I don't think it has accomplished anything that it set out to do. It's basically just being a PR stunt. It's just there because Reddit complained so much about the team instabilities. But like, if you actually want to accomplish something with a lock, first of all, I don't see what the point is of locking teams before they've actually earned a spot at the major or at TI. Like, there's no conceivable reason why you'd need to lock them in, because they know better than you what they need to do. Like, if you're willing to take their word that this is what's best for them, I don't care if they change rosters like a day before they get invited. I don't care. Whatever.
Well, let me ask you guys this, and maybe you have a thought on it. We have right now going into TI, we have all of the top teams, for the most part, are sponsored or have organizations supporting them. Do you think that the roster locks had anything to do with Valve and the hoping to create some sort of value investment for these organizations to not be worried about picking up a team and then losing them because they switch rosters? Because isn't that a benefit to an investor to say, well, at least I know I'm going to have these guys for the next 3 months?
No, because you have no security like that, because those players can, whenever they want, they can leave that organization and they'll retain the spot. You, as an organization, can get completely screwed over. Anyone, like, if a rich enough organization came today and said, I want to buy out Team Liquid's or Team Liquid or OG. OG is player owned, so whatever. But let's say Team Liquid. You can buy out Team Liquid. You can take their whole roster and you can take their spot. And Team Liquid's just going to be there. Like,
but you can't poach their top player without risking a move to opens, correct?
No. Well, I mean, yeah, you can't poach one player, but you can poach the whole team. So there's no,
depending on how Team Liquid's contracts are written.
Right.
I don't know what depends. But like almost every team has like hard buyout that you can just pay and get the player.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on roster locks / before we move forward to the next grouping, guys?
Oh, well, before we get to TI and everything, any predictions on the roster locks next year? I don't even know where to go with that. Like, are they just gone, like totally out the window? Do we get like a big blog post about it?
No, I think we're going to see continued roster locks, but I think
we're going to see some kind of locks, but I would prefer it if people were locked in only after they get a spot, and if everyone had to submit their subs only like a week after qualifiers are done, because that way you can actually get quality players to sub for these teams. And those, like, what you do with those subs after that, that's up to you, how much you wish to engage them and so forth. But as it stands, those subs are either left empty. You've got coaches, you've got managers sitting on those spots, you've got Sir Action Slack sitting on that spot. I don't know. I don't think this is
shows how useful it is.
System. I don't think this is what the substitute system was created for. No.
Right.
I think so. It seems to me that the sub setup was for something more like EG's doing with Zai, bringing him in because they have worked with him before and they know how he does work, and he's someone they want to play with, but he just couldn't play for a certain period of time.
So to be clear, your theory is that the subsystem was set up to screw over Kaipi?
Yeah, exactly. Only the richest of richest teams are going to be able to afford players the same caliber as their normal players to sit on the bench.
If we consider Valve's history, Valve is set up to screw over Kaipi.
That's true. That's fair.
And I'm sure we could spend hours talking just about roster locks and the benefits and the downsides of a subsystem. That is not our topic for tonight, so let's get a little bit back on topic and talk a bit more about the invites. So earlier we kind of ran through a quick list of teams that we thought would be invited, and for the most part people seem to be in agreement about the top 8 or so. The kind of toss-up teams seem to be more along the lines of Complexity, DC, Alliance, and Vega. If there's somebody else you want to throw into that list as a possibility, go for it. But kind of those 4 teams taking the last 2 theoretical slots, who gets it and why?
Complexity and Alliance. Yeah. Assuming Alliance perform not completely terribly at ESL 1.
Yeah.
So, what if Call bomb out at ESL? Frankfurt?
I don't think it matters, to be honest.
Historically, hasn't Valve always brought someone from the region?
I think it only matters if Complexity lose to like Virtus Pro, and Virtus Pro then also don't make it out of the group stage. Like if Complexity literally don't win a game, maybe then Alliance takes that spot and Complexity doesn't get a direct invite. But other than that, I think Complexity's. I'm fairly confident in that call.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So then, so Gorgon, you made the good point in your article that despite the fact that DC recently had a run of games against Complexity in which they beat them repeatedly and horribly, ending in the Canada Cup sadness for Complexity. But you did talk about how Complexity has had a more stable roster, has had more and better LAN results. They haven't changed as much recently, and their consistency is what puts them ahead, which does seem to be something that Valve has focused on in the past. However, if, as you suggested, Complexity tanks it completely at ESL, we are left without a presumptive NA Dota invite, barring DC. Do you think that DC could get that invite in the event of Complexity dropping it completely?
Yeah, maybe.
I'm going to say no. Like, for me, basically, I think DC is actually a better team right now, either Complexity or Alliance. But they failed to show it. Like, they had their opening to show it in Manila, and they came up short.
Well, technically, they went out in the same position, didn't they?
Yeah, they went out in the same position. But the thing is, those teams have more of a history. Right. So, like, DC needed something to get them a leg up on those teams. And they didn't.
They really needed top 8, or I mean, I don't think top 8 guarantees invite, but then they're like certainly in the conversation. And top 4 would have guaranteeing. Top 4 definitely would have guaranteed, obviously. But
like Navi basically. The way I understand from talking to some people, the way I understand Valve's thinking about invites is they don't consider what the qualifiers are going to look like, but there might be some actually, I'm not sure if there really is that much interest, but still, like there might be some interest in like maybe having a team from a region, and like I think you really want to have a CIS team, and that's why Navi is like a safe invite, even at like just making top 8. And like they still have some, like they were
They did well at
top
DreamHack.
2 at they got top 2 at
Dream League,
DreamHack, top 2
They
at
did-
Starladder Invitational.
Like
Like these weren't good tournaments by any means. Like there were a lot of teams that weren't playing well at Starladder Invitational, and DreamHack was basically just OG spanking them. So.
Yeah, but I mean, OG is
But
it's to win Manila, right?
Yeah,
so if
yeah,
Navi could
yeah,
stand up
but
to
that's-
everyone except OG. That's a pretty good sign. And I mean, they did finish in top 8. I think that they're pretty. I'm way more comfortable with Navi than VGR, and I think VGR still makes it in. So
For me, VGR is like, yeah.
I have the same feeling that
Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
feeling like 65% on VGR.
I'm fairly certain like the top 8 isn't gonna get touched. So there's just nobody. There's no candidates to put above them, really.
So, historically speaking, looking at the list that Gorgon has made, notably missing is the historically always invited previous TI winner, which we've been operating under the assumption that since EG switched and acknowledged that by switching they invalidated themselves from being an invited team, we've been operating under the assumption that they don't get an invite. What if Valve just says, "Fuck it, we're going to invite them because we're Valve and we can do that"? How does that change the look of things?
They take complexity spot then. And then complexity at ESL1 by beating Alliance or the other teams there.
Yeah. And like I presume that they've at least in some capacity tried to talk to Valve and like go, "Hey, we're gonna do this." Or like Bruno was at Manila.
Mm-hmm.
He knew the change was happening. He would have told them like what the situation was. So if they say, like, the fact that they actually publicly said that they're going to have to go through the qualifiers, and the fact that they're practicing for the qualifiers, that really speaks
Does it though? I mean, wouldn't every team prepare for the worst case decision? I mean,
PPD
Bruno
even
could have simply
said
said we got to discuss it.
they don't know for sure yet still.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will
Did say that in a
this.
statement earlier today, I believe.
So if Bruno says we don't know what we're going to do, then the obvious reaction is, shit, we're going to fly to San Francisco and start
Fair
training
enough.
just in case.
Yeah.
Right, but it sounds like EG aren't lobbying to be invited either, and that I think makes a difference.
Yeah.
Like they've said we expect to go through the open qualifiers, which implies to me we are not lobbying Valve. When
Mhm.
Valve made an exception for Evil Geniuses based on roster problems in 2014 because of Fear's health issue,
Mhm.
as opposed to Era's health issue in Fnatic, which was not given a similar roster sort of leniency. It was because EG was lobbying them. EG lobbied them with a good reason, and it protected the players.
Yeah, and EG went out of their way to talk to Valve even before they got involved in 2014. So, like, Valve knew this was probably happening.
I think the end all be all is we don't know for sure, and EG could be invited, but I think it would be a bad move on Valve's part, and I don't expect to see it.
The guy on the
I'm
subway,
personally
the guy on the
expecting it.
subway clearly knew.
I'm actually expecting the invite. I'm just saying.
So if Mod is right, then I'm pretty confident that they just take that spot that I gave to Complexity, and then Alliance and Complexity are both competing at ESL1. Like, it doesn't change the picture that much, but
Well, doesn't that also isn't there an issue if we go to directly the NA qualifiers, an issue of like who even gets those invites? Because I mean, Dakota posted online today. There's like 4 teams that have had stable rosters that would be qualifier invitable.
Yes.
yeah, you want a list of the teams because I have an article coming out
Oh,
tomorrow.
yeah.
It's
Guess
so
How
bad,
convenient your
dude.
transition.
EU is just as bad. I'm just gonna say this. Like,
Yes.
these are the teams that, like, off the top of my head, that have to go through qualifiers: Secret, Team Spirit, Polarity, Kaipi, Danish Bear, Screen Squad, Fantastic Five.
Okay. So
And
in
what do we
the
got for NA, Gorgon?
In the Americas, there were originally 19 teams that Valve would have considered notable teams. They have mostly professional players or at least one big professional player. 19. Okay. Out of those 19, let's see. We have 2 disbanded, 6 definitely with roster changes, 2 more that seem to have had roster changes. 1 is disqualified because of match fixing. 1 appears to be inactive. 1 we're expecting to have a direct invite, which leaves us with 6 teams that meet the roster qualifications.
Yep.
There's 6 teams, maybe 8 if you go all the way down to Void Boys and Earth Hippo. Void Boys has not won a game since January and have not played a match since the start of May. And Earth Hippo, I don't even know that they played any ticketed matches. But if you count both of those 2 as still active, I couldn't find any proof that they're completely inactive, that they've disbanded.
Mhm.
So if both of those guys are active, then you have the 8 teams that you're looking for. In Digital Chaos, Perky Pepperonis, Kingdom, Not Today, Evernova,
Oh.
Team Freedom, Earth Hippo, Void Boys. Those
Is
are literally
Mott
the
on
only 8
Perky
teams.
Pepperonis? Does anybody know?
Wait, what?
Is Mott on Perky Pepperonis?
I don't think so.
He should be their team mascot, I think.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in Europe, if Alliance gets the invite, we have Empire, VP, VG, Adfinem, and I don't know.
Oh my God, is that it?
Yeah.
No.
That's all the stable rosters.
No,
yes.
no diggity, no diggity.
No diggity. Yeah.
Except,
There we go.
I don't know if Syndron is on that team because he's Alliance coach.
I mean,
But I guess he's going to try and qualify.
in a weird way, does Valve bending the rules for EG to get the direct invite fix a lot of these problems for them regarding qualifier invites?
No, because
Not
then
really.
complexity gets
Okay.
kicked out of the direct invite, and then the complexity just takes EG's place. Like then there's
I-
one
I-
more
I-
team, I guess.
I think
Yeah.
Right,
they're
but
just going to have a lot of open qualifier spots.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like that's what they did when NA had like a bunch of roster swaps after the qualifier invites went out, or they were like undocumented.
I counted
Roster
11 notable teams that I could find that are probably going through the open qualifiers with no fewer than 7 notable freelancers or free
So-
agents. Who
So
might
before
make a team.
we get to the open qualifier teams, because I do want to talk about that, I did also want to check in about the SEA and the Chinese teams. So Danny, as our resident SEA specialist right now, what are the teams that we're going to be looking at for coming out of qualifiers there?
Open qualifiers or main qualifiers?
Main qualifiers, invited.
Okay, invited. So I've always wanted to see TNC, honestly. Like TNC getting into the actual wild card, but every time like the team somehow falters under pressure. I don't know if it's like a team thing or if it's like a mentality thing, but every single time like TNC just breaks.
It's a Chen
They
Midas
always
thing.
lose it.
It is.
Pretty much. But I'm actually gonna keep my hopes up and say like maybe TNC could break through. Signature Trust, they have potential. Now we did see some controversy during last qualifiers where they were, doing some stuff here and there. But I feel like they as a team, like that wasn't really an issue. Like they are a pretty stable team. We could see them actually moving on through. Mineski, they did go through a bit of a change, but they have received a lot of positive changes so far. So I think Mineski, we could be seeing them as well. Tiring are a mess. Orange Tiring is a complete mess. I'm honestly cannot see them really going anywhere with this. Even though they have a lot of notable players on their team, I really don't see Tiring moving anywhere. Anyone else I could be missing? Just give me a moment. But outside of that, though, I think like those are the big teams that I'd be looking for in Southeast Asia.
Did you mention Mineski?
I did.
Yes, she did.
I
Okay.
did. I did mention Mineski. That some people were talking about Mineski X, but no, I really don't see Mineski X going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Unless we see the Mongols pulling something out of their sleeve again.
What was
I
the
think
what was that VCG team or whatever it was called? They made some like small splashes, but
Are you talking about the Indian one, Beyond Infinity? Those guys?
Oh, Beyond.
No, they like the team that eliminated MVP from some qualify like before.
That was Mongols, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Mongols, I think.
There was another one as well. Oh, Warriors
it?
United or whatever.
Oh, Warriors Gaming.
Warriors
Unity
Gaming.
Warriors Gaming.
Yeah.
Warriors Gaming. So they are more or less a special case. They do suffer from inconsistencies. So they can
Yeah.
do it, but they will be like TNC and they might not be able to do it. It's just this is the problem with C in general. Like teams are very inconsistent. They are not used to playing for such big tournaments because we don't have tournaments like that in Southeast Asia. So it's like pressure is our biggest weakness right now. And teams, if they can get past that pressure, then you're going to be seeing more teams like Fnatic and MVPs. But for now, it's like mentally, it's the biggest handicap for C right now.
I'd really like to see White Fries also go through the SCA qualifier instead of China.
They've got to go through open either way.
Yeah.
SunTzu, thank you for that very convenient transition over to China, because we have not talked about that region yet, about who might possibly get invites to the qualifiers. We have talked about teams that we think would get, main event invites, but not qualifiers. Who are we talking right now?
Let's first say that eHome, Vici Gaming, and Newbie Y are all going to the open qualifiers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, boy.
What happened to Newbie Y? Who did they swap?
Newbie Y lost Fan because eHome took him.
Right.
I don't actually know who
hold
Newbie Y is.
And caused the whole region to kind of collapse a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I always thought Newbie Y had potential. I feel like they're a good squad.
Newbie Y, they have like really good players.
Too Late is like the primo offlaner.
Yeah. Like they have 3 really good players. I said after the Manila Major qualifiers that for me, Newbie Y and CDCY are the teams that you go to steal players from when you need to improve your roster right now. Previously it was CDCA, and CDCA got fucking they got robbed. No left, September left. Forget who else, but yeah, they basically got gutted.
All right, so let's go in the same order, talk a little bit about who we think is going to be up and coming through the open qualifiers. And in North America, I get the feeling that that's going to be a gigantic and utter shit show, given the number of roster swaps we've seen recently, the number of reasonably or even really good teams that are going to have to play through open qualifiers. Is this actually going to be like an any given Sunday situation where somebody could come out of the woodwork and surprise everyone? Or is it going to be, we have all these teams that just, they had slightly unstable rosters and they're just going to trounce everyone else?
It's like 11 hours of best of ones. It is, anybody can win. There's, it doesn't matter how good you are. Like, if you have a 95% chance to win by the time you get through the best of one open qualifiers, the compounding 95% chances bring you down to like a 55% chance to move through the open qualifiers.
And you know for a fact, and we know for a fact, that it's open qualifiers, not just casuals who want to say that they played against EG, but all kinds of ex-pros are making headhunter teams literally designed to hope that they can knock out teams like EG and Secret in the open qualifiers for bragging rights or old grudges or whatever it is. That creates an even more difficult sense. On the upside, it's just the first time we can see open qualifier teams stand a legitimate chance of performing well at the big show, if that makes sense.
Not really.
Like the top of the field. It's one thing just because like the top of the field is so good now, and we're like, oh, every tournament, any team could win, and it's such a great spectator experience. Like all the open qualifier teams are still going to get crushed. Like there's still like definitely it's widening at the top, but it doesn't mean that all these open qualifier teams are any closer. I don't think.
Unless like Zai makes Evil Geniuses amazing, and then they come through the open qualifier.
No, I mean I'm counting Evil Geniuses as tier 1, not these other squads.
Yeah. Like EG is not they are not your everyday open qualifier team. And in terms of if you look at what EG's problem was at Manila, their drafting was shit. Like, but in terms of their play was completely okay. They had some execution problems with some drafts, but it's stuff that isn't going to matter in the NA qualifier. And also, like the NA teams, they don't play the same kind of style that just punishes everything that EG was trying to do. So I think EG isn't going to have much of trouble like qualifying for TI, even if they have to start from the open qualifier.
The best of one thing, it's so hard to. I
but
think
like
EG should go through, no problem. I mean, especially with Zai back on the team, he's one of the most talented Dota players to ever grace the game, right? Like, and they got Universe back. Like they should. On paper, they should have no problem getting through the open qualifiers, but they're best of ones, and we've seen EG lose games both in scrims and in actual tournaments to other open qualifier teams we know are going to the open qualifiers. So, like,
I mean,
it's happened in the past.
Yeah, but the track records for teams that had to go through open qualifiers that were considered good, like Empire for the first one for Frankfurt, they had to go through there because they made a roster swap too late, and they did it easily. Same thing, BG Gaming in China did it easily. TNC in SEA, no problem. So I think the record is fairly clear that if you're actually a good team, it's a slog, it's really annoying, but you're generally not going to lose those games. It's the teams that are like almost good those are the teams that sometimes mess up in open qualifiers, because there's a number of almost good teams.
Team Archon gave up a spot at Frankfurt. They didn't make it through the open qualifiers, and they were absolutely confident that they would. They didn't, right? But
they overestimated how good they were.
Right, yeah, that's the thing. They weren't as strong as they thought they were. But I agree that EG's performance was largely drafting, but I think they had a lot of synergy issues, and I don't think that bringing two players back on instantly fixes those synergy issues. So it's really, there are going to be threads to be pulled there. It is.
Yeah,
I expect them to pass through, but I would not be surprised if they fell to the 7 to 9% chance that they don't. Right?
Yeah. But like if they crash and burn, I think it's in the main qualifier. Like they make it through the opens, and then DC has a very good chance of beating them. And does Shazam still exist?
Well, I mean, we're probably wasting our time talking about this, because mark my words, EG is just going to get a direct invite. And I can almost guarantee that.
I'm kind of with Toffees on this one. I think this is one of the situations where Valve is going to say, we're Valve, we can do what we want, we're inviting EG, so deal with it. However, the team that is a lot less likely to get an invite on the grounds of Valve just feels like it.
Wait, hold on. We're split 2-3. I need to know what Danny thinks on this.
Ooh.
You're the only
Danny,
one that hasn't given an opinion. Does Valve
Honestly,
direct invite?
I have a mixed opinion, but I don't think they're going to get the invite. No.
Oh, now we're 3-3.
Now we're 3-3.
Shh.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Do I jump bandwagon so you can have
No. You hold fast to your vote. You have earned your opinion. You should hold it.
MotPax.
It's okay. You're on the winning side right now.
All right, guys. Okay, so right now, calling it right now. Team thinking that EG is getting invite, which is me and MotPax and Toffees, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. If we are correct, if EG does in fact get an invite, Danny, Gorgon, and SunTzu must write a love poem together.
Oh no!
And if we are incorrect, and EG does not get an invite, we must do the same thing.
Whoa! I'm just being confrontational. They're not actually getting an invite. Just so we're clear. I'm not a great at any love poems. All right.
Honestly, it seems like
this is a long-standing tradition on the Campfire.
It seems like it comes down to, if Valve is going to hard commit to roster locks next season or next year, then they won't get an invite. And if they're going to start to sort of move away from the roster lock idea because it hasn't worked, then that's the time to sort of say, it wasn't a great idea. We're going to bring EG back anyway.
I think they should.
Valve doesn't,
because it undermines the authority of any rules that they set. Period.
Right, exactly.
You can't. The point of rules is to make an even playing ground. And if you're going to set a rule and then for the second time in only 2 years break a rule for a specific team, that is a level of favoritism that is not going to go over well, I think. And I think Valve realizes that.
All right, so moving away from the possibility of EG getting an invite, because we're on the fence about it for very many reasons. I think people are a little less on the fence about Secret, despite the fact that they have won a major of their own, and we're considering, major performance to be an indicator of whether or not you're getting an invite. We're not expecting Secret to be getting an invite, which means that they are going through qualifiers. So that's not an invite qualifier either. That's an open qualifier. So looking at the EU open qualifiers, we've got Secret. Who else could step up and perform well?
I mean, there's a large pool of teams there. The upside is Kaipi looked like one of the better teams in that open or like in that qualifier. Yeah, they were already having to go through open qualifier because they made
They picked up
changes
before.
too late. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even before that, I think they broke.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, they dropped Canton.
Yeah.
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 He was the original roster
So
lock.
they've broken it 3 times now. Nice. Yeah, so Kaipi looked like one of the better teams.
Bad for them.
But they are new now, like really weak. Like in terms of the open qualifying teams, just
Qualifier.
Team Spirit might be kind of good. Wait a second, who? They've got. Yeah, right. They've got. What's his name? Undershock or something like that. Came in just a minute, just like after they lost Iceberg to Polarity. And Polarity looks pretty good now because Polarity has Iceberg and Silent and DK Phobos Little always want to fly. Yeah. So Polarity is maybe on paper the best team of these, but I don't know how well they're gonna work as a team.
I think there's a pretty realistic. I mean, I'd say I have like 100% certainty. I actually think there's like virtually 0% chance that EG lose in the open qualifiers, but I could see Secret losing in open qualifiers, frankly. Even if they do make
it comes down to like, I think they're gonna have a lot more than just 2 spots for each region for the open qualifiers because there's way too many teams in there. And at that point, I think Secret probably makes it through. But the question is, how well does Secret do in the main qualifiers? And that's anybody's guess. Because Secret's problem wasn't drafting. Like, they have a pretty good grasp on the meta. They are using a bit too many... Like, they're better when they don't have Puppy on a jungler. But I think they're sort of understanding that themselves as well because they've been sort of moving away from that. But their real problem was that as a team, they didn't work. They didn't trust each other. You could see it. When someone went in, when someone made a call, you could literally see the hesitation from the other players because they didn't trust each other. And like that can literally turn on a dime. All it takes is like, for example, you change the caller. That's what happened. Like when they bottomed out of Starladder before they swapped, like 2.0, Secret 2.0, before they swapped S4 to Captain. You could see in their gameplay that they weren't trusting each other. Then they swapped. S4 was calling. People trusted S4. Games started working, and they went on for 4-tournament win spree. So that's how I look at a Secret. It literally can turn on a dime. We'll see.
All right, so there's a brief look at the open qualifier for EU, and obviously we're most looking at what the heck Secret is going to do, given that they are probably the most prominent team going through open qualifiers. Let's switch over to our next region, which is going to be SEA. So we've talked about who we think is going to make it as an invited qualifier team, or who possibly could. What are we thinking as far as the open qualifiers? Are there any teams that we don't know about yet, Danny, or is there anything that people who haven't been following the SEA scene quite as closely wouldn't know to look for?
In terms of C teams, we probably going to be looking at the same teams that we normally do. Like, I would love to point out Power Gaming, but that's DDZ and Lance's team. And unfortunately, they can't play in Valve events, so that's completely off the table, unfortunately. I did see them play at a LAN recently in Malaysia, and they had a lot of potential, but it's rather upsetting that we're not going to be able to see them. We already talked about Warriors Gaming. Execration is still there, but I wouldn't really put them on the table either. Like, they'll probably play, but they won't really perform. Like there's really no one outside of what we've already seen. Like C is just developing at such a slow rate that we're not going to be able to see any surprise teams unless we have something like another team like Mongols or another team like Beyond Infinity. But from what it stands, like for all the games that I've cast and tournaments that I've done, there's nobody new in the scene. So
Yeah.
So that
So
seems to
very-
be. So it seems
It's
like
TNC.
the C teams have the opposite problem that some of our other regions have, in that despite the fact that there's so few teams that can be invited to the qualifiers, the number of teams that can come through open qualifiers and actually contest from C is significantly smaller than that number for NA or EU. So
Exactly.
then,
we only had like last qualifiers, we only had like one team that was legitimately okay that came through the open qualifiers, and then the team after that, like it really wasn't the case. So
Yeah.
if anything, I know this sounds terrible, I really don't think C deserves many invites, if maybe at all. Our scene is just not developed enough to be able to compete with NA and EU as it stands. We are way behind in terms of skill level. Like we've got Fnatic and MVP, like they're two great teams, but no other team is able to compete with them at all. And if that's the case, like why give us more invites when no one is able to perform on the same level?
Yeah, but sadly, Liquid had to go in to MVP, and now we pretty much have to give SCA 2 spots. Although we probably would have had to either way, but Liquid didn't help the situation.
fair enough. And then last but not
But-
least, moving on to China as well. Who are we thinking for going through the open qualifiers? We did discuss some of like the youth and the academy teams that have to go through because of all the roster swapping. Anybody
White
unexpected
fries.
on that front as well? White fries.
Right? They have to do their thing.
No.
That's
Yes.
pretty much
I'm
it,
sorry.
isn't it?
No.
Yeah, that's
They
pretty much it.
white fries. No, I've
No.
seen enough.
No. They're not there. In terms of like last open qualifier, it was Newbie Y who had to go through because they just didn't get an invite to the direct invite to the qualifier. They probably should have, but in terms of ultimately their performance wasn't that good in the main qualifier, so whatever. It was them and VG Gaming who had to go through the open qualifier. They easily made it through. Now it's Newbie Y, eHome, and VG. And given that Newbie Y just lost a player to eHome, and eHome probably has the better pedigree, VG is actually looking pretty good. VG can actually maybe qualify for TI. Maybe.
Did you watch?
Like,
Did you guys
it's
watch
close.
ELM play last night in DPL?
Didn't see it. No.
I think that they look really good right now, I guess is the moral of the story.
Okay.
I think that they're performing even better than I've seen them
I-
perform in the past.
I mean, they looked really good before ESL Manila, but then they completely tanked with ESL 1 Manila, and then the whole team just went really strange for a long while. But like, it shouldn't be hard to get that team to work. Like, they have a good coach, they have a lot of good players, the players have good positions, and it makes sense. So yeah, that should be a team that should work. Should be a no-brainer. We'll see.
I agree. It's looking so. It's overall, it's looking like our open qualifiers are probably going to be more contested than they ever have been, in large part because of the roster locks and roster swaps. So we're looking at teams that we would expect to have invites on the grounds of their play, not getting them on the grounds of they broke the rules. So of those teams, Danny, talking SCA, who do you think comes out of it as the winner of the SCA qualifier?
I would have to say Signature Trust.
Mm.
That's a pretty big call, I think, but it would have to be Trust. I really don't trust TNC at this point. Just every single time they've failed to perform.
I believe. I'm
You-
TNC.
if you want-
I have
If
faith.
you want, you can have
I
faith.
have faith in
I think
TNC.
they need- They
I
need your
I
faith.
stand with TNC.
I haven't followed SEA Dota that closely
No
for
way.
a little while, but why are we not at all talking Mineski? Did I miss something on that?
I
They
think
changed one of their players.
no, Mineski is. Oh, what they after this, like after Manila?
I mean,
they?
compared to SEA though.
Oh no! After Manila, before Manila.
Yeah, but it was
Yeah.
they swapped in their coach,
Mhm.
so
So
they're still eligible and like
Well,
they
So
played
I
okay.
have to
actually
beat SEA.
casted. I
It's not a
casted a
particularly
SEA
strong
LAN right before the Manila Majors. Actually, there was Signature Trust, Orange Tiring, and Mineski. And Mineski lost to Signature Trust convincingly
Okay.
on
Yeah.
LAN.
Like I think Mineski did a little bit better than people expected in Manila in terms of they actually got a game off EG, although that was a lot of just
Yeah.
goddamn that EG draft was complete garbage. And they almost beat MVP, which okay, sure, but like we talked a bit at the top of the show about how like MVP performs worse within SEA online. And I think the reason they perform worse is because those teams know MVP. And the reason MVP performs so well on LAN is because they play against a lot of teams that just don't do proper analysis and prep for MVP.
Yeah.
And like continuously when I watch teams draft against MVP, I'm just pulling out my hair because I don't understand what they're doing. Because MVP's always been pretty easy to read in terms of their drafting. So
All right, so let me ask you guys this now, because I want everybody a chance to answer. It doesn't matter what region. I know some of us are unfamiliar with different ones. As we move into qualifiers, Open's going to be exciting. Then qualifiers will be good, sort of once we see what Open teams get through. But what teams and what regions are you most excited about watching over the next couple of weeks here? What do you think is going to be the most explosive, the most fun to sort of keep your eyes on? What should we set our alarm clocks for?
I'd say Europe and China are complete clusterfucks, and that's going to be interesting.
I would say EU. Honestly, like EU
Okay.
has always got the best games. That means I have to stay up.
EU has 10 okay to good teams. China has like maybe 6 to like I'm gonna be maybe 6
All right, so we've got votes for EU. We've got votes for EU. Gorgon, what are you thinking?
I'm interested to see how EG does through the open qualifiers and how quickly they come together. Like I said, I expect them to get through the open qualifiers, and I expect them to have to face off against Digital Chaos in the regional qualifiers. I'm interested for that. And then, of course, like everybody else, I think Europe's going to be a very interesting region as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess, but I'm going to say I want to watch the NA Open because I think it's going to be intense and a lot of fun. And then I want to watch the Euro qualifiers because I think that there's going to be a lot of competition in that region.
And last but not least, our resident lumberjack Canadian, who can't say bagel. What do you think will be the most exciting to watch? What do you got for us? And please don't just say something North America because you want to see how other teams backed up against Complexity.
Oh, no, of course not. I mean, the big story is definitely going to be... I'm not really looking at Opens, honestly. I think they're kind of excited because of the whole best of one thing, but I'm more excited for the actual competition of the qualifiers. So SEA is actually going to be a pretty big, dogfight. It's going to get pretty scrappy. I'm certain TNC, they got lots of proof, expecting a lot. But I know the majority of people who probably tune into this stuff are more into that EU NA scene, and those will also be pretty crazy. So, honestly, we're just all going to be watching Dota 24.
But isn't SEA's going to be scrappy in the sense of like how a high school playoff is scrappy when you compare it to the pro or the big dogs? It's just
pretty
like,
much.
Wow, qualifiers was cool, but too bad you got to meet the real world now.
In terms of like top competition, it's going to be. I'm expecting like AdFinem to probably take out at least one big dog in EU.
In terms of, so for me, in terms of what's going to be like the most exciting, high quality teams clashing games of Dota, I definitely think EU is going to take it. In terms of what could be like the scrappiest, clowniest, cheesiest, and craziest stuff we see, I am totally setting an alarm clock to wake up and watch some SEA Dota.
Or wings, Dota.
I think China's gonna be
Wings are fucking
really,
wings.
Yeah, wings.
What were
are
you saying, son?
Yeah, I think China's going to be really interesting in terms of. I think a lot of people aren't really on top of the fact that wings might actually not even make it to, like, because a lot of the teams that are in that qualifier can at least take games off wings. BG Gaming can take games off them. eHome can take games off them. CDZY is going to choke again. Somehow they're going to find a way to choke. They're literally the TNC of China. They're going to find a way. So, yeah, but that's going to be an interesting. Also, NA probably has the best qualifier finals matchup because it's hopefully going to be EG versus DC, and that's like absolutely two very high quality teams.
Yeah.
I think no matter what region you're going to be watching, there's going to be some good Dota abounding. Whether it's good in terms of strats or good in terms of the craziness, is kind of going to be up to which region you're watching at any given time. I think in the end, the ultimate winners are totally going to be us, the viewers, and us, the talk show host, because we're going to get some crazy awesome stuff to talk about. We're all going to get some crazy awesome stuff to see. So thank you guys very much for coming on, for sharing your expertise and your opinions, for arguing a little bit with each other, especially that part. Special thanks to Toffees for coming on and co-hosting with us, making this a melded show today. Before we wrap, does anybody have shout-outs, thanks they want to give, anything to that effect, starting with Gorgon, because you're in the top left currently? You can also just say no.
The stuff that we've talked about today is the stuff I've been writing about, so if you guys swing over to pvplive.net, I've got some articles on the qualifiers and more in-depth analysis as to why I expect the style that we were talking about and why I expect the teams we were talking about beat by beat. And then North American qualifiers write-up is ready to go and should be out tomorrow morning.
All right, we're excited to be looking forward to that, to see that work coming out from you. SunTzu, any shout-outs you want to give?
Not really.
That's fair.
Best of luck to Secret. Been talking to Boba a bit after that whole thing happened, and I really like that guy. I think people are way too hard on him, and he finds the success that he deserves. Like, he's actually a way better player than people give him credit for.
All right, Danny. Danny of the misspelled name. Okay, guys, just I have to say, Danny does now currently hold the title for the best origin story given for her name, and that it was a typo on her birth certificate. Other than that nurse who gave you a very memorable title, is there anybody you want to shout out to?
No, that's okay. I don't really have anything else to say. I'm rather embarrassed, but that's okay.
It was a great story. We really did appreciate, because of all of us here, you're the one who's been following us here the closest, especially with the recent cast of that land. So we're really glad that you were able to step up and share your expertise there, because I know it's earlier in the morning for you. And MotPax, last but not least, anything for you?
I mean, good luck to Demon. I thought that I was getting just messing with me here. I thought it was just a joke. Seriously? You just bail on Peru? Oh, going to Peru,
dude,
guys.
Come on. He's a career Dota mercenary.
Hashtag road to TI6. What a guy, honestly. I take back everything about having any hope for TNC. Adios, amigos. Nice knowing you. Can't believe Teehee's gone. So, that's what happens when you're off the internet all day.
They hired the Halliburton of Dota.
What? Teehee left TNC? Where? What now?
Yeah, Demon's replacing Teehee.
Yeah.
Surprise! Yeah, Demon, Jimmy Ho. He's in the Philippines. He abandoned Peru because of EG. I actually thought that was a fucking joke.
Okay, yeah, TNC isn't doing shit.
Yeah, no, they're done. Goodbye, TNC.
Told you. Well, kind of did.
You did. Technically, you did. You did tell us that we should not have faith in TNC. And you were entirely correct now.
It's like a reality TV show. I can't believe it. This is better than Void Boys trying to go in the SCA qualifier. This is far superior. I'll be watching the shit out of them now. I'm gonna have Demon cast.
Toffees as our guest host. Anything you want to shout out before we wrap?
I just want to shout out to all of those teams going into open qualifiers that want to take down the big dogs. I'm looking for a free ticket to TI, so if you have a sub slot, feel free to put me in it. I will travel with you and get you apples and bananas and drinks while we're at the event. So let me know if Sir Action Slacks can be a sub. I sure as shit can too.
Wait,
If that's the case, I would love to be a sub as well.
There we go. There's the best argument we've got. If Sir Action Selects can do it, anybody can.
Are apples,
guys-
bananas, and drinks a euphemism there, Toffees, or are you like just food, just a food guy?
No, I remember when EG was like transitioning between managers. Like the new manager was just this guy that carried him around with bananas for a while, and then finally we all found out like he's taking over the whole thing. It was just funny. Anyway, don't worry about me. My jokes are dad related, and at Toffees TV.
All right, guys, as you can see, all of our guests and our guest hosts' Twitter tags are up underneath their names on the Campfire with Coffees. Next week, we will be taking a bit of a different route. We're going to be talking with some cosplayers across multiple different scenes, looking at a very different side of things than the competitive play. So hopefully you guys will be around to join us for that if you're not busy watching some really awesome Dota. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'm Kate from the Campfire. We're out.